Today is Friday, April 22nd. We're talking about how the U.S. is stepping up with even more help for troops in Ukraine, as well as Ukrainians who have been forced to flee. Also, what the Supreme Court decided about benefits for some Puerto Ricans, and why the CDC is warning families and doctors about two concerning health trends. Plus, why Disney will likely lose some special privileges in Florida, which streaming service is shutting down after less than a month, and how people around the world are honoring Mother Earth on this Earth Day. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Ukraine is getting fresh support from the United States as the war against Russia gets even more difficult. President Biden promised another $1.3 billion for new weapons and economic assistance for Ukraine. That's on top of the more than $3 billion in aid that's already been approved since the invasion began. And Biden promised to ask for even more help from Congress to keep the cash coming. And that's an issue that seems to have bipartisan backing. Top U.S. Democrats and Republicans have said they strongly support the idea. Ukraine's President Zelensky thanked the U.S. during his nightly address, but he says his country will still need a lot more. Zelensky told the World Bank that Ukraine will need hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild, since the war has left so much of the country in ruins. Many other allies have sent in help too. Just this week, leaders from Spain and Denmark promised Ukraine more weapons. By the way, the U.S. also has a new plan to help some of the Ukrainians who have been forced to flee their home country. President Biden announced a new refugee sponsorship program. So Ukrainians who have a sponsor here in the U.S. will be quickly allowed in, and they'll be able to stay here for up to 2 years. Sponsors can be family members, other individual Americans, or organizations like churches. But the refugees will need those sponsors who can financially support them. They'll have to pass security vetting and have the necessary vaccines, too. Starting Monday, Americans can apply online through the Homeland Security Department to become sponsors, and the potential sponsors have to clear background checks as well. This comes as more than 5 million people have escaped Ukraine, mostly fleeing to other European countries. President Biden has promised to accept about 100,000 of them. The former president of Honduras is now facing serious criminal charges here in the United States. Juan Orlando Hernandez left office just 3 months ago. Now he faces drug trafficking and weapons charges. That's a pretty dramatic turnaround, since the U.S. once embraced Hernandez as a key ally in the war on drugs. But the U.S. Attorney General says the former president, quote, abused his position to operate the country as a narco state. Prosecutors say Hernandez was part of a corrupt and violent drug trafficking conspiracy that moved more than 550 tons of cocaine into the U.S. They accuse him of receiving millions of dollars from drug cartels, including from the notorious Mexican drug lord El Chapo. And in return, drug traffickers were able to operate freely in his country. But the former president has repeatedly said he's innocent. Hernandez has said he's actually the victim of drug traffickers who are lying to get revenge against him. So it'll be up to a U.S. court to decide. His first hearing is scheduled for today. The U.S. Supreme Court just backed up a decision from Congress that means people living in Puerto Rico are ineligible for certain benefits. The Supplemental Security Income program is a federal program that helps low-income seniors, disabled people, and blind people. That program is available in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. But Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories are not included. Critics have called that discriminatory because people who live in Puerto Rico are American citizens, but they don't have all the same rights. Like, they can vote in primary elections, but not the presidential election, and they have limited representation in Congress. Though many do not pay a federal income tax. And it's because of that tax law that the court decided in an 8-1 vote it was okay to exclude Puerto Ricans from the program. The only member of the High Court who thought otherwise was Justice Sonia Sotomayor, whose parents were born in Puerto Rico. If the program was extended to Puerto Rico, more than 300,000 Puerto Ricans would have qualified. Now that won't happen unless Congress were to change the law. The CDC has noticed two small but growing health trends it wants to warn doctors and parents about. First, the federal agency told doctors to be on the lookout for unusual cases of severe hepatitis in kids. That's a liver inflammation that so far infected 11 children in Alabama and North Carolina, even though all of them were healthy before without any underlying conditions. It's still not clear what's causing this issue. Symptoms include fever, fatigue, stomach issues, and yellowing of the eyes and skin. Separately, the CDC says American kindergartners have fallen behind on some routine childhood vaccinations. And now there's concern that life-threatening but preventable illnesses like measles could become more common. Public health experts mostly blame the pandemic, since they say a lot of families decided to skip checkups when they didn't want to expose their kids to COVID-19. And others decided not to enroll their kids in kindergarten at all, so they didn't get the shots required for schools. On top of that, the American Academy of Pediatrics says more parents are starting to question routine vaccines now that there's debate about COVID-19 shots. No matter the reason, the CDC is now encouraging doctors' offices and schools to remind families when kids are due for their routine vaccines. All right, we have more news just ahead, but first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Do you ever notice that the stress in your life can show up in ways you may not have expected? Think doom scrolling, sleeping too little or too much, or eating too little or too much. Yes, stress can show up in all kinds of ways. And in a world that's telling you to do more all the time, let this be a reminder to take care of yourself and do less sometimes. And maybe try some therapy. I know from experience that therapy can offer you a much-needed reminder that it is okay to not be productive all of the time, and help you react to stress in a different, more useful way. Well, BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can give it a try. See if online therapy can help lower your stress. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and the Newsworthy listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BETTERHELP, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Some good news for workers. The number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits continues to hover around half-century lows. The U.S. Labor Department reported a drop in new claims last week, bringing the total down to its lowest level in more than 50 years. And the number of people already collecting jobless aid was down to its lowest level since 1970. So it looks like April has been another month of strong job growth. Already, employers have been adding an average of nearly 600,000 jobs each month this year through March. Reuters reports a shortage of workers is keeping layoffs at record lows, and businesses need more workers to meet high consumer demand right now. One of the largest private employers in the state of Florida could be losing some of its special privileges. Florida's state legislature passed 2 bills that would punish Disney for speaking out against another highly controversial Florida law, the one that critics have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. Remember, the law does not specifically ban the word gay, but it says educators in Florida will no longer be allowed to talk about sexual orientation or gender identity with any students in kindergarten through 3rd grade, among other things. Well, Disney publicly criticized the bill and promised to help fight it in court, saying it'll stand up for the rights of the LGBTQ+ community in Florida. Now the company is facing a change in state law that could have huge tax implications. It would strip Disney of its ability to self-govern the land surrounding Disney World. It's a special status Disney has actually had since the 60s. It essentially allows Disney to act with the same authority as the county government when it comes to the land around its theme park. And that includes providing things like emergency services, water, utilities, and more. Florida's Republican governor says this is necessary since Disney is, quote, trying to impose a woke ideology on our state, and we view that as a significant threat. He's also said a company should not get special privileges just because it's powerful. But Democrats in the state have tried to stop this, warning that it could have major consequences for not only Disney employees, but also county taxpayers and local governments who will suddenly need to take on some new responsibilities and costs. Either way, assuming the governor does sign the bills into law as expected, Disney is set to lose its special status in June of next year. CNN launched its own new streaming service called CNN Plus, but now, just a few weeks after launch, it's already shutting down. The new service was celebrated as a way to take the network into the digital future, and it cost tens of millions of dollars. But now the incoming president says actually shutting it down is the right move for CNN's long-term success. The Wall Street Journal reports the service had fewer than 100,000 subscribers after launch, and at any given time, fewer than 10,000 people were watching CNN Plus. Those numbers apparently did not impress the network's new parent company. Yes, another potential reason for the change is that CNN has new management. CNN's former parent company, Warner Media, merged with Discovery earlier this month. As for the subscribers, any current customers will get prorated refunds, and the streaming service officially stops on April 30th. Today is the day to honor our planet. It's Earth Day. The holiday started more than 50 years ago, and it's now the most widely observed secular holiday around the world. More than 1 billion people in almost 200 countries mark the occasion. It's meant as a day to appreciate nature, as well as raise awareness about environmental challenges. EarthDay.org says this year's theme is Invest in Our Planet. And the site put out 52 different ways to do just that, as well as a map to find events happening near you. Rallies and protests are planned in several American cities. Nonprofits are also organizing volunteer community cleanups, local fun runs, and more. And tomorrow, New York City is marking the occasion by shutting down more than 100 streets across all 5 boroughs. Instead of traffic, the streets will be full of music, dance, art, biking, and education. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Feel Good Friday, when we bring you one extra feel-good or positive news story before the weekend. But first, a message from our sponsor. If you're in need of loungewear that looks and feels good, then you're going to love Tommy John. You can feel cozy, but not lazy, in new elevated women's and men's loungewear from Tommy John. I'm talking about high-quality, breathable, super soft and comfortable fabric that hangs just right. In fact, you know that feeling when your favorite loungewear is in the dirty laundry and nothing else is really what you want to wear? That's how I feel about my Tommy John lounge joggers. So now I have 2 pairs. And in addition to the joggers, they also have cozy and stylish bralettes, leggings, pajama sets, and more. Plus, returns and exchanges are free with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free, guarantee. And right now, it's Tommy John's anniversary month, so whether you're trying them for the very first time or a longtime fan like me, get 25% off site-wide right now at TommyJohn.com/newsworthy. Go to TommyJohn.com/newsworthy today for 25% off. TommyJohn.com/newsworthy. See the site for details. Now back to Feel Good Friday. A World War II veteran has been getting some overwhelming support from his community and other people he's never even met before. 94-year-old Paul Roberts lost everything he owned in a house fire last month, except for a few pictures. After his home was destroyed, his neighbors went over to check on him and were surprised by his positive attitude about the whole thing. In fact, when he was interviewed about it, Roberts said, quote, "What are you going to do? We can't be moping around forever, you know?" Well, his neighbors were so inspired that they started a GoFundMe page for him that has since brought in nearly $170,000. Donors have been writing on the page to thank him for his service and wish him well. They're hoping he can use the money to rebuild his home on the Jersey Shore. In the meantime, Robert says he's making the most out of life. The 94-year-old still walks, rides a bike, and goes fishing regularly. And he said he's learned something from his experience that, quote, "There's a lot of good people in this world." All right, we'll be back tomorrow with our special edition Saturday episode about bias in the news media, including a scientific analysis of it. Then join us again Monday for your next news roundup. For now, thank you so much for listening and have a great weekend.